Greetings. I want to try to go over real quick why the media, though protected under the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, why the media is a largely the Western media compromised entity, and why we no longer really have freedom of speech in a true sense. While the media apparatus, how it's been played out, is something that very few minds can comprehend, just because it is so massive and so intertwined and so invasive and pervasive. I know when I was in mass media class, they said the average American consumed 9 hours of media a day. The effects of that and the real pervasiveness are very, very hard to gauge. But anyways, how it's been played out, nobody could have created it. It's something that happened over time, kind of like evolution. Small advancements, small consolidations of power, reductions of alternative messages happened over time. And of course the internet has been disruptive, kind of like some sort of asteroid coming down, meteor, and disrupting the apex predators, the organisms at the top, and threatening a reorganization of what's been going on. To give an analogy, basically where the media seemed to had taken a turn for the worse. And you got to understand, these airwaves are our airwaves, just like the resources are our resources, and the benefits should go to us, not a few connected people, a few connected organizations at the top, which is what's happening in both sectors of natural resources and also our airwaves. So they owe us a duty by us allowing them to broadcast their information over the airwaves. Well, under President Reagan, his appointee of the FCC, Mark Fowler, I think his name was, overturned what was a Supreme Court-backed fairness doctrine, which basically said people that don't have the money but have an alternative viewpoint, should get equal amount of airtime. And so that was a protection for the people, that the people, interested parties that may have the knowledge but not the vast amounts of capital, would be able to get their message out to the people, so the people could make an informed decision. And an informed public is, something that is intrinsic in having a democracy. You can't have a true democracy if the public is in a mental cage, which unfortunately is what has taken place. If you're in a mental cage, you don't, your oppressors don't need chains. You can just be a wage slave. And the British had this idea a long time ago where they could free the slaves, pay them wages, and yet, everything the slaves could buy with the wages were owned by the same people, the British. And so while they thought they were free, they ended up dying with nothing, and all the resources, all the human capital, everything that was produced still goes to the same rulers. And it's the same thing that happened during the Industrial Revolution in America with the big trusts, where these immigrants would basically get conned over coming to America believing that they were going to get paid a lot, and the wages were higher. They'd sell their farm off, come over here and get ripped off right away, end up going into one of these trust cities that were owned by a few men, work at a factory, and then of course the money goes back to the bankers who wrote a predatory loan and gave them a house, and everyone else that is feeding them poison, etc., etc., and their family gets destroyed. Same sort of dynamic, different time. Maybe the British actually articulated it, the trusts. Well, I'm sure they did over time. They realized, if it wasn't the same people, they realized what was beneficial to them as opposed to the people. But anyways, so the fairness doctrine was overturned, and that may be why today the media celebrates Reagan so much. I mean, because he gave him a boom, you know. He allowed for the beginning of the increased consolidation, because if you control the message, you know, you can control the mind, and then you can do what you need to with the minds to get your agenda pushed forward. So then the next major step, I would say, would be under the first Iraq War. I mean, it goes back way farther, but this is I'm just simplifying it. The second Iraq War under Bush, where Bush owed his presidency to a favorable Supreme Court and a favorable media, you know, with his dealings with Florida. It wasn't a democratic election. So he had his friend's son appointed to head of the FCC, and that was Colin Powell's son, you know, a famous general who was then Secretary of Defense, I believe. I mean, it's very incestuous. So you got this guy Michael Powell going in and allowing for the media to increase their consolidation over America's message, which is basically an attack on American information, which is an attack on the American people, because they're limiting, again, the amount of information, the amount of sources of information we have, and therefore, you know, limiting the mental tools that we have to make informed decisions. So they did that, and the media, media repaid him, you know, very, you know, in a very nice manner, just parroted his, well, I won't say, well, yeah, his or his friends' manufactured claims about, you know, Saddam seeking yellow cake uranium and having a meeting in whatever, Prague, the same place I think they more recently accused Trump and Russian officials of having a meeting, or one of the Baltic states, I forget. All that BS, they parroted that, and then they allowed these embedded in journalists into Iraq or whatever, you know. Yeah, freedom of press, but not one of the journalists was with an Iraqi family. No real carnage was shown. I mean, everything was positive. They were basically selling war to America. They weren't practicing journalism, you know, and of course they weren't calling it a conspiracy theory, which is what they use to undermine any message that conflicts with their own. You know, if it's a message they want to put forward, like Russia's taking over the world somehow, then it's not a conspiracy theory, even though there is no evidence, where other things do have evidence, but they don't fit the agenda, or they threaten the powers, and those are labeled conspiracy theories. And that is another consequence of having not a free media. And there's so many consequences. It's why we don't really understand the world as Americans. I mean, we don't understand China. We don't understand Russia. They're putting a noose around China with bases. If you know the real story, you'll see it's not about Chinese aggression. I mean, they need to get oil to keep their factories going, and we're putting bases all around them, and you know, saying that they have no access to islands that we indeed had agreed that were theirs. Anyways, another story, and it's the same with Russia. We're growing NATO and claiming Russian aggression. I mean, who has China ever invaded, even though Taiwan was part of their country, part of their culture for generations? And, you know, oh yeah, Russia invaded Crimea. Well, 50 years ago it was Russia. Kiev was the capital of ancient Russia. A drunk Soviet leader gave Crimea to the Ukraine, and not only that, they had a 98% approval to secede from the Ukraine after there was a NATO / American bankers deep state coup created in order to install a puppet government in the Ukraine. I mean, it's a joke. And then they say Russian aggression when they just oversaw the implementation of free and fair elections inside of Crimea. Again, we don't have a free media. You know, they talk about the general now being kicked out because he violated the Logan Act, but before you had Nancy Pelosi meddling around in Syria. You had Barack Obama in Iraq before he was elected. I mean, real, you know, trying to delay the negotiation for troop withdrawal in Iraq. I mean, it goes on and on. You go back to Kissinger, and Kissinger's still alive. Why isn't he being tried? Kissinger, Nixon, stopping the peace treaty in Vietnam until after they got elected, and it caused thousands more Americans to die. So it's really, what I'm saying, it's really biased, the way they pretend they're outraged, and they pretend, this person's about to, stupid motherfucker. They pretend they're outraged at bullshit, basically. I mean, it's whatever fits their agenda. And the sad thing is people buy it. Over and over and over, they're buying it, you know, and they're buying this Russian connection. And it just came out that the CIA had infiltrated, or had orders to infiltrate, France during their elections, and we've been doing it in country after country after country. And if people knew the history, I mean, it would just be a joke. Once you learn the history, then it's like you've been given an antidote for their BS, and you can see right through it, and it looks like a big game, it looks like a big joke, and it's ridiculous. From Hillary's emails, you know, on an unsecure server. I mean, what is up with that? And all her crimes, and her being tied to overthrowing the Libya, and Bush and invading Iraq illegally. And people die, children, babies die, and you want to argue about some general saying, hey, sanctions might possibly be lifted, and Russian aggression. I mean, it is so ridiculous. It'll seem like a joke. But to go back, why is the media susceptible to not giving us the information that is good for us? Well, it's as simple as you don't bite the hand that feeds you. Traditionally, the people that paid for the media were the advertisers, and the advertisers, you know, often are these massive corporations that have many products. So the media isn't going to go against the products that are funding them. They're not going to go against the government that has allowed them to monopolize past what is fair and right. They're scratching each other's backs over and over. They don't want to upset, you know, they don't want to upset their advertisers. It's like, let's say you got Disney, you know, let's say Disney owns an internet company and a media company, the parent company of all these companies, a news agency, and the news agency finds out that Disney's bullying or enacting legislation within Anaheim that's going to cause small businesses to shut down, with the intention that Disney's going to be able to buy that land and expand. If they find out a scoop, do you think they're really going to report on Disney, which owns them? No. And the web is just, every time there's a boom and bust period, capital accumulates into fewer and fewer hands, and the problems such as these are continuing to, you know, their effects are more apparent, and they happen. Their effects are stronger. It's happening more and more. You know, more and more companies, more and more media. There's less and less companies owning more and more of the media, and so we get less and less unbiased information. You had Reagan cut already small funding to PBS, which, you know, PBS, if it was funded properly, then it could give whatever message it wanted to without having to worry about offending its donors. But that is not the case. Their budget's been truncated, especially adjusted for inflation, and they do have to kowtow to the politicians and also to the advertisers. You got radio stations like 90.7 KPFK in California, which are still fully funded by listeners, as opposed to NPR, which is another joke. It's completely compromised. for the most part, our media is compromised, and there's a fight for the internet, which again is like a meteor coming in and disrupting the natural order that has already been laid out. But you know, these are sophisticated animals, and they're working to limit our ability to fight them, fight for the truth, you know, coming out with this fake news and everything else. And when there's popular leaders that come elected, if they really are for the people, I'm not saying the one in America is at this point, but in a certain he's against a certain part of the establishment. They're doing all they can, making their own conspiracy theories, like ridiculous, real conspiracy theories that hold no water and have no evidence, to do whatever they can to attack them. And by attacking them, they're really attacking us. That their main purpose is to attack us for their own consolidation of power and control. You know, everyone, they call it, like, I know the far right thinks it's a socialist boogeyman, you know, far left conspiracy. It's not. They're left for themselves. You know, they preach capitalism to us, but for themselves, they want to protect themselves with our tax money, and they do that. But they don't care about us. They want us as slaves. They want full control. Once there's one government that controls everything, then who can oppose it? Especially with the technology they have today, on the brink of artificial intelligence and everything, and we're at a real pivotal, scary point. And somebody who wants peace with Russia, with all the nuclear weapons they have, and why we've been building up on their border with NATO, that is a good thing, something that helps secure our own future. We do not want Russia as an enemy. We do not want China as an enemy. We have a lot of common ground with them. Who we don't have common ground with are the central bankers, the elite, the deep state, the puppet politicians, sociopaths that are running our government, and the intelligence agencies that, you know, obviously have too much power, and, you know, see what they're doing with Trump. But I mean, they can go tap your phone and look at your camera, your computer. I mean, it's ridiculous. And we need to stand up and stop being divided as a people, and that's what the media does. It helps divide us. Old rules learned from Rome: divide and rule. And so they choose all these issues that have no real impact. All the real issues aren't even talked about, and they choose these very divisive things, like rights for transgender people, abortion, social services, etc., while leaving out the real issues that affect us, and you know, make the politicians and their friends' pockets deeper while they threaten us with war, push us into war like we are in the Middle East, distract us with certain conflicts while, you know, Africa gets raped, Yemen gets bombed to hell. You know, our Earth is in the largest extinction since the dinosaurs, etc., etc. Real things don't even get talked about, but they go fly these pollutive helicopters and go show us how a bear is being chased by cops. It's complete nonsense. Media is not free. Have a good day.